Okay, let's start. Lajar.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex. I'm a co-founder of Butter. We do governance mechanisms for DAOs. We try to make protocols resilient to capture. And today I'm going to talk about Uniswap, the fee, the protocol fee at Uniswap. And this is going to be a talk with vampires and math, so you should be, I'm going to frighten you a lot. I want to talk about the fee switch at Uniswap, so not the recent, for those who follow, I don't want to talk about the front-end fee that was that is now in use on the Uniswap on the front end. I want to talk about the protocol fee, so the one which is taking fees out of liquidity providing fees on the protocol itself. And I'm going to show how this is causing a threat on Uniswap itself. Yeah, so do we see that? Yeah, that's a. This is a vampire. So I'm going to lay a simple model, lay down a simple model of Uniswap, how such an attack would work, and how to fund it, and get some teachings out. So the basic idea of this thing is really like if Uniswap takes a fee out of liquidity providing fees, so LP fees, it basically means that it's getting less competitive. So that's a super basic intuition, and from there, I want to kind of like build a fork and an attack on Uniswap, just on basically on the margin that they lose, that they make LPs lose, basically. So that's a really super basic intuition, and I will just go through that step by step. And so we've built a quick model for that, like a quick paper on that, to reason about how this attack would look like, what does it mean for governance. So I'm going to walk you through the conclusions of our work. So a simple model for Uniswap to start. So I want to look into, so first Uniswap v2, and just one pool to keep it simple. So we want to look into the competition between AMM1 on the left and AMM2 on the right. So this is Uniswap, this is another AMM basically. For now there is no protocol fee. I just want to look into the basics. So in a pool you have token A, token B, swaps between the two. And what goes on in the middle is the volume. Swappers, what they care about is, I'm saying it's price impact. The only difference between a large pool and a small pool, a large AMM and a small AMM, again, I'm just using one pool per AMM for now, is the price impact. The rest is going to be the same because it's a fork. So it means the larger pool is going to be better for you. So that's usual. You know that the price is less moved, so we go into it. And for LPs, the thing they care about is volume. So for those of you who like DeFi, you know this curve. It's X, Y, K, and the price impact is just that you move along the curve as you do a swap. So it means that the realized price is not going to be the one with which you start. So you want this arrow to be as small as possible so that you have as small as price impact. And this is going to be achieved by having larger and larger pools. This intuition basically means that there is a network effect in liquidity. So you want all liquidity to be in the same place. In terms of swappers, I just want to show this curve just to reason about how do you want to allocate, if you're a swapper, between two AMMs. So if you have on the left, it's like I allocate all my swaps, so like all the volume, or all the swaps I do to the first AMM. On the right, I allocate everything to the second AMM. If the second AMM is smaller, you obviously get less utility. So utility, is like what you get out of what you do. For those who are less in game theory, so or economics. So you get less from AMM2 because it's smaller, as we've seen. You get more from AMM1, but still the curve is like this, and that's because the terms are looking like that. There is a quadratic term. And what that means? It means that the optimal allocation is somewhere in the middle. So that's a basic result of the allocation game for swappers. What that means is it's unobvious that swappers are going to move the needle between the large AMM and the smaller AMM. But there are transaction fees, and so like the quick thing there is that as you have only one, if you go 100% on AMM1, you are better off because you don't pay transaction fees. You pay only one transaction, whereas if you transact on two AMMs, you pay twice transaction fees. So you're better off like bundling together on transactions and making on one AMM. These kind of arguments, the conclusions we take from them is that you always have a slight preference, as long as there are swappers which make small swaps and transaction fees are not negligible. There are going to be an amount of volume that prefers the larger AMM. So this is the point I wanted to make. So as soon as we have this result, it basically means that the larger AMM is going to little by little suck up all the volume. So that's the conclusion. I look at more towards AMMs with larger, the AMM with larger reserves. Not everything, but more. On the LP side, actually it's a bit less clear because, strictly speaking, the terms are going to look like this. This is like volume divided by reserve, so liquidity. So on AMM2, it's going to be, actually we show it's going to probably be lower than on AMM1, but actually the problem with LPs is that you have trouble reasoning about the distribution of LPs. You have pools where you have like 80% in one LP, basically on a single project is providing liquidity for its own token, whereas you have pools where LPs are more distributed. So it's a bit harder to find results on what they would do. But basically, we show that with these two allocation games, you end up in having at least swappers having a slight preference for the AMM with larger reserves, larger liquidity. And so we did a quick model for that, a quick simulation for that. So like this just means that whenever you start, an AMM starts with more than 50%, at the end it's going to end up with all the liquidity. And that's the intuition behind the network effect. So that's a network effect. And so if you start, so this simulation shows that basically, so that's just a simulation, but if you start at 85% or something like that, it will increase to like this. If you start at 55, it still increases. If you start at 50, which is it's an equilibrium, but it's not stable, then you should stay at 50 because there is no preference between the two AMMs. But if you start slightly below 50, then it's the second AMM which wins. So this is like how much is going to the first AMM until 100%, and there it goes down to 0%. So everything goes to the second AMM. Yeah, so that model confirms the intuition that whenever you start with a bit more liquidity, you should end up with all the liquidity over time. So that's the first thing. So we kind of like justifying the intuitions with a basic model. Now I will go into the attack. So I don't know what's the textbook definition for vampire attack, but basically that's an attack with a fork plus a subsidy, and so you fork the smart contracts you implement a form of subsidy, and that makes the liquidity flight, which means that liquidity is drained out of the main AMM, it goes to the second AMM. So that's what the kind of thing that Sushi did. And I will make a comparison after just to place that. For the attack, so there needs to be the fee, so I'm kind of adding this up on the previous model. So what is the fee, the protocol fee? I'm just explaining that. So if you have swaps, then a part of the swaps is taken out as a LP fee, so that's how Uniswap works. So that's returns, like income for the LPs. But importantly, I'm making this arrow come back inside of the AMM because the LP fees are staying in the system. So that's very important because it means basically that no value is extracted by LPs because it's accruing in the liquidity. That's good for the AMM. As we saw before, you prefer there is larger liquidity. Everyone prefers that the liquidity is larger. Whereas this is the arrow down there is the protocol fee. So that's part of the fee that should go to the LPs, and that is taken out and goes to as rent, as dividends to Uni token holders. And just to keep it simple, we consider that the fee is only switched on at a given point in time. And so what happens there in the intuition is that, so I'm saying, if the fee is switched on in this competitor which doesn't have a fee, this competitor will capture more than its fair share because it doesn't have a fee, so it's like more attractive. Use this extra volume that comes to the competitor to fund the subsidy. We'll see how, and with a big enough subsidy, we can make the network effect change balance and go to the second AMM rather than the first one. So I give some quick intuitions about how that works. So the point, so I tried to show this already before. So you have LPs. This represents like the equation for the basic one for how much they earn, and the term here, which is the letter rho, represents the protocol fee. So as you see, it's a negative term, so it's taken out of the pockets of the LPs. Or it's not going in pockets of the LPs. And so if you start with a larger AMM, this V1 on R1, actually we show that it's probably going to be bigger than an AMM2, if it's a smaller one. And what the AMM2 is going to try to do is to, on the contrary, add a sigma, which is representing a subsidy, so sigma for subsidy. And the idea is that if you make sigma large enough, so basically epsilon, you take the equilibrium value and you add epsilon, it should make the LPs stop allocating to AMM1 and prefer allocating to AMM2. So if you have this term that is large enough, LPs should start strictly preferring AM2 rationally. And so this has a cost. Yeah, this is again another simulation for that. What would be the cost, the total cost? So if you think about the term I was showing before, so this term sigma, it needs to be there for some amount of time until you have like half of the LPs that have moved to the second AMM, in which case the network effect has kind of changed balance, and now you can stop subsidizing. That's the basic model. And so yeah, just run some computations for knowing how much that would be. That depends on like how much of the LPs are reallocating at each round. So for example, if you consider that that's kind of a rate of change, because obviously your rate of change is something that depends on a lot of factors. Like I'm saying, like brand, smart contract risk, bigger risks. From the point of view of large LPs, like large market makers, stuff like that, they would not, even if there is a more interesting option, they would not change right away. So in the end, that makes this curve go on the left, and at zero, it costs infinity. So yeah, that's I don't know where the right result is, but we see that like costs are not like, at least with this super simple model, the costs are for example, rental percent is around 1 million, whereas I started with 100 million volume. So it's not that big. So that's the total cost of the subsidy through time to change the network effects. So yeah, that's the result of our computations. Now I want to get into kind of like what we are actually working on at Butter, which is like funding and governance mechanisms. So the thing is, like, how do you pay for that subsidy? And you basically, so we need to implement a funding mechanism, so you need to make it so that the AMM2 can pay for it. So basically the approach is, first of all, AMM2 has no fee switch in its governance surface. Governance surface means there's no parameter for the fee switch, so that's good because it means that we can implement some governance mechanisms and not be afraid of the same problem. So AMM2 will not end up doing the same as AMM1 because it doesn't have a fee switch at all. And the basic ideas are that if you want to pay for a subsidy, you can raise debt. And we'll see why it's a bit better than thinking in equity terms. I'll explain quickly. And funding via governance mechanisms or crowdfunding are some of the options. So I'm just restating that. To fund, you have different options. Like equity-like is like governance tokens, right? So you sell them and you get some money. Debt is so you can imagine the second AMM creating raising debt and repaying this debt with a governance mechanism which produces returns. So auctions, I will go into some of the options there, and or directly crowdfunding. So the idea is LPs basically will pay for that. In more detail, problem with governance tokens and the basic reason why it's an issue is that it gets concentrated, so the interests of the few are going to be predominant. So that's what happens in most DAOs today, so that's the kind of thing we're working on. The other option I was saying is basically you take the future revenue of governance, so let's say governance produces return, and you wrap it in debt. Yeah, so that's an approach. So I'm giving some quick examples of what it could be in my small paper. So you can auction of parameters, or auction of proposals, or use some mix of different approaches. And crowdfunding is just that normally, like if in very theoretical economic terms, so LPs and swappers are losing something when the rho superior is 0 to 0 means the fee is activated. Rho is equal to 0, his fee is not activated. Normally they earn more there than there. So there is a delta, and so theoretically, in very theoretical terms, so it's a cohesion theorem kind of argument, they should be ready to fund the crowdfunding contracts, which in turn funds the second AMM subsidy. Yeah, so that's just an overview of the different approaches. And conclusions. So the point that we're really trying to make is that unit token holders with the fee, they are extracting value out of the protocol. So this is what I've shown before, like there's an arrow which goes out of the AMM. And this value can be, so that's, yeah, sorry, it's a bit barbaric, but that's just like a present value of how much the unit token holder would gain from such a protocol fee. So rho is the instantaneous protocol fee, it's the rate. V is the volume, and this is just a discount factor. And what we've seen before, actually, I'm just restating the same, is that if rho is fixed, V is limited by the attack, because it's basically V is going to 0. This is what I've shown before. So it means that overall this integral this value is going to be reduced thanks to the attack. And I'm saying also that another approach from the actual governance is probably that they would, if they activate a fee, they would activate it and deactivate it and just like watch what goes on in markets, like if precisely liquidity is moving off and going to other AMMs, they could like reduce the fee and so on. But so what's interesting as a takeaway is that the existence of such attacks, of such like potential competitors, means that it provides pressure on governance for not setting the fee as too high. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Forking smart contracts influence governance, and in game theoretic terms, it's a bit like what we call a green trigger, which means that the attackers are kind of saying to the unit token holders, pay attention, otherwise we launch the attack and you are going to siphon out your liquidity. Yeah, that's all. So that's a link to the actual quick paper. It's just an article with some maths inside. I'd love to have some feedback, and whoever wants to discuss this in more detail, I'd be happy to discuss. Thanks.